Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NetApp On Air. As always, I am your host, Nick Howell. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode. And if this is your first one, we got 2 years worth of back catalog for you to catch up on right here on the YouTube channel. So make sure you go back and check out anything you may have missed over the last couple of years. We are back after Insight. Last week, we had Tony Ansley on going over all things SnapMirror, including Snap Vault and Snap Lock and all the other snappy things that that tends to devolve into. But we got another Snap one for you today. We're going to be talking about snapshots a lot more today, but just in a little bit of a different context, a little bit more of a deeper application style context. So grab a drink, strap in. This one's going to be super technical. We're going to get into actual demos today. We're going to show you some products, and we're going to show you how to take care of all of your mission critical applications and beyond with this product we're going to go over today. As you've seen in the title at this point, we're going to be talking about SnapCenter. And I went around and found who would be the best person to showcase this, who would be the best person to highlight it, and we've got him here for you today. Before we get to that, make sure you come and join us in Discord. It is the hub of our community. It's where we want everybody to hang out. It's a very technical crowd. It's where all of our partners and customer practitioners, everybody hangs out in there, going over their solutions, helping one another with their day-to-day operations, how to solve problems, all that good stuff. So head over to netappdiscord.com or discord.gg/netapp. And get in there, get signed up, go through our onboarding, make sure you get all of your right roles and all that stuff. We're up over 5,000 members now, on the way to 10,000. So we want to make sure you get in there, because a lot of the stuff that we're doing with On Air, with the community in general and events around the world, all of it's going to be showcased in there as well. So netappdiscord.com, make sure you come and join us. All right. Without further ado, let's bring our guest on. We have a lot to talk about. We are going to be going over the history of snaps and how we got here, specifically with regards to how it used to be done with applications like Exchange, SQL, Oracle, all of those things, and how it's evolved into what it is today with the product known as SnapCenter. So let me welcome to the show Mr. Artie Noel. Artie, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing well, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you for being here. This is going to be a deep, deep conversation, because we need to cover several areas of... We need to start with how we got here and sort of work backwards and see how we've gotten to this point with SnapCenter. You and I were talking a little bit before the show. We both have some history with what we used to call the Snap Manager product line. So could you give yourself an introduction and let people know what you do here and what some of your focus areas are?
Absolutely. So, hi, everyone. My name's Artie Noel. I'm a solutions architect. I playfully call myself the utility player on the solutions architect team because my current focus areas are on-air block protocols or block solutions, virtualization, and database, right? So I primarily cover our integrations with Microsoft SQL. I've been at NetApp for a little over 10 years in total, and prior to coming to NetApp, I spent almost 20 years as a practitioner. Nice. That experience that you mentioned, Nick. So I used to run big Exchange environments, as small as, I want to say, like around 900 at a small state agency in Virginia, all the way up to better than 150,000 mailboxes globally with one of the big federal systems integrators. So
I think my biggest one was maybe 20,000 ish.
Yeah, so I did that at one of our financials for a while. So I've kind of seen small, I've seen medium, I've seen large, and the bane of any Exchange admin's existence in the past was always backup, and not even really backup as much as recovery and the impact backup could have on the users that were actually trying to access and send email, right? So older tech, other systems backup software, whether it be stuff like UltraBack or, reaching back in the day to see a Bright Store, ArcServe, you name it. I've probably run it. They all could do some really interesting stuff, but when it came to doing database backup and granular recoverability of data within a database, they were slow and not always reliable.
Yeah, and I'm going to trigger you and maybe some members of the audience by saying Enterprise Vault.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes. Let's
So
journal.
I'm old enough to have my MCSE 2000, and one of my 2 electives was Exchange 2000.
Yep.
So a core piece of my early days of Windows administration was contract work, basically. A lot for the government, a lot for financial institutions, doing Exchange and AD migrations. I was one of like 3 people in Charlotte that had MCSE 2000. So I got a lot of work, and when Y2K was happening, because people just didn't know. And there was really no good product. We had to do a lot of CSV exports. We had to moving mailboxes manually from 5.5 and stuff like that. And then we got into Enterprise Vault territory. And at this point, I had not even really heard of NetApp, honestly. A lot of it was on Symmetrix, Clarion stuff in that time frame. So that was usually the back end of what you would see big Exchange deployments have. Was dedicated storage stacks, right?
Oh, yeah.
So when I joined a very large healthcare firm in the late 2000s, we started doing a lot of virtualization, and we brought our Exchange back in-house from a managed service provider, and we had found, between that point, we were running all of our VMware on NetApp storage at that point, because we had kind of discovered it in 2006, 2007. And we realized that, why can't we virtualize Exchange? Rules around iSCSI. Oh, you got to direct mount RDMs, all that kind of stuff. Well, if I do that, can't I do snapshots of the LUNs on the storage system? Actually, yeah. It completely revolutionized it. We ended up implementing it for not only Exchange, but for Microsoft SQL, Oracle. Saved our company $1 million at the time, just because we could downgrade the Oracle licenses, because we had eliminated DataGuard and RMAN and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean,
absolutely.
When I say that you've got 2 guys here that we're deep in the Snap Manager world, I'm not kidding. So when we talk about what we're going to talk about today, I think that it's important to go over that stuff, because it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. All of the different Snap Manager interfaces were managed by different teams. They looked different. The workflows were similar, but still different. And each of them had their own nuance based on what application they were protecting. So the way that they operated were dissimilar. And so you had to know really how each of them were going to, interact with your apps, interact with ONTAP. SnapDrive versions, is OSSV involved for anything discrete? Like there was a lot of moving parts to stitch that whole thing together.
Well, and then you had
here we are 15 years
problem.
Later. Go ahead, sir.
And then you had the whole upgrade problem too, because the way the Snap Managers worked, they actually got installed on each individual host. So that meant that you had to go through and install the full application each time there was a new version on each host you were protecting. So Snap Manager was great. It did some really cool things. It made backups a real snap. It made recovery a real snap. Our partnerships with other third party, tools like our SMBR capability, which has been superseded by on-track power controls. It gave a lot of really good functionality, but yeah, it had its own challenges. No centralized reporting. You couldn't send out any screens of my backups are running successfully across my entire estate, unless your estate was a single server, right?
Right.
So,
right.
But it was still really good software, and honestly, it's the whole reason I came to work for NetApp.
So that's a good segue. So, like, what was the genesis? What was the thing that made everybody step back and go, we need to consolidate all of this? Because we've tried to do this a couple of times over the last 15 years. How did we end up landing on SnapCenter? Are you aware of that history?
A little bit. I know that we got into a situation where we were at one of our Foresight events. I want to say probably 2014-ish, maybe.
I miss Foresight.
And they were talking about they being our product teams. We're talking about a couple of different things. One, a lot of it was customer feedback driven. They were getting a lot of feedback from some really major customers. There was a big database provider, their name may have been Schmorkel, that really liked our stuff and actually helped us really do a lot of innovation around snapshots and cloning and how all of that worked. That were also looking at us going, but we can't install this full package every time we need to instantiate a new database server. The management, the operational overhead that it took, it had a real cost. And additionally, internally, the development overhead, you had 5 or 6, as you mentioned, 5 or 6 different branched code trees, all trying to achieve the same thing. And a lot of duplication of effort and siloed off skill sets and knowledge that were not being able to be used. So the idea came about we don't want to talk about fully replacing. We want to create our own data protection solution that has the ability to centrally manage all of the applications we have integrations into.
Yeah.
And out of that is where SnapCenter 1.0 was born.
Gotcha. And am I correct in remembering that the first one was basically a giant PowerShell commandlet set of commandlets?
Yes, and actually, there's still a lot of PowerShell under the covers. But yeah, the very first instance was effectively a very long PowerShell script that managed SQL databases.
Nice. I forgot to mention one of the most popular ones at the time, SMVI, Snap Manager for Virtual Infrastructure, for basically backing up VMware.
Absolutely.
Using ONTAP. And I was part of the team that helped fold that into the VSC, now known as OTV, back in the day. So we called it VSC Backup and Recovery. And that has since moved over to SnapCenter as well, I believe, yeah?
So there is the air backup or data protection and orchestration capabilities around virtual machines has absolutely moved into what we term the SnapCenter framework. Yeah. But it has an interesting capability in that it actually deploys as an OVA inside of your VMware environment, and then can provide that instantaneous backup, recovery, and cloning capability of your virtual machines, of your data stores. It can do tag-based backup and recovery. So it's a really interesting tool. And then when you combine that with application recovery, so for your SQL databases, you now have that full end-to-end data protection and orchestration story. And while a lot of our Exchange workloads may have moved over to Microsoft 365, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, MongoDB, MySQL, and all of the open database systems definitely still run on ONTAP today. Some of them run as bare metal, some of them run as virtual systems. So regardless of how you're delivering storage targets to your database management system or the database management system you're using, we have a solution to help you orchestrate backup and recovery and more. And in addition to that, being able to clone and take advantage of making the best use of your data in an operational context.
And I think that's one of the things that's most slept on is what to do. The fact that we give you capabilities beyond just taking the backup. Once you have the backup, you don't have to just sit it in a vault and forget about it until you need it. You can absolutely do that. But understand that there's, like we were talking about with Tony and SnapMirror last week, like once you get the mirrored data to the other side, the same thing can apply to backups. You can then flex clone those into demos, into testing applications. Like there's a lot of functionality beyond just taking a snapshot-based backup that you can take advantage of within ONTAP. So I'm hoping we can go over some of that stuff today. I know you've got a full demo for us pulled up that we're going to walk through. And I want to take a minute to everything that you're going to see today is available to customers and partners in Lab on Demand. You guys can go and do this. Your labondemand.netapp.com. You can go and do all of these yourself. Shout out to Toby, Brian, the rest of the crew over there in Lab on Demand.
Right.
But you guys do killer work. So I want you to know that everything that you're going to watch today, we're going to walk you through a lot of the stuff and have some conversations about what Artie's working on here. But at the same time, like, know that you can do this in a self-paced fashion. You can go through these steps yourself, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other labs on there that you might be interested in at the same time. So keep an eye on Lab on Demand if you're a practitioner and you want a nice test area that you can go and tinker with that can be destructive, and without messing up your own environment. It's available to all customers and all partners. So, Artie, where do we start? What's the latest and greatest, like, version-wise, and where are we at in the evolution of SnapCenter today?
Sure. SnapCenter has actually been on a pretty long journey. Like I said, it started with just the SQL capability back with version 1.0. Today we are currently shipping SnapCenter 6. We've actually done 2 pretty large releases within a year. So we released our SnapCenter 5.0 solution about a year back. Yeah. And its big new feature set was integration with tamper-proof snapshot capability, right? So, and let's also take just one quick step back. You said you want to talk about this from kind of that fundamental level, right? So
yeah,
SnapCenter definitely takes advantage of on-tap snapshots, but in addition to that, there's a lot of software that will use snapshots and allow you to do recovery and backup with it. SnapCenter is a little different in the fact that because it also integrates into the database management system like Oracle, like SQL, it automates what can be a partially automated and manual process. And what I mean by that is that typically when you do a recovery, you have a recovery team that's going to recover, do your restore from whatever your backup and recovery application is, and it's going to leverage whatever media type it is, whether it's LTO tape or something of that nature. Right. And then you've got to get it surfaced up to the application and mounted to the application, and then in the database world, you then have to attach the database and make it ready for either log file replay or customer access or application access. Well, SnapCenter does all of that for you. It actually goes through the process of mounting the storage, presenting that storage to the host operating system. And then from there, once the storage and the database files are available to the system for use, it then goes to the next step and accesses the database management system tools and goes through the process of attaching the database and leaving the database in the desired state from the DBA's perspective, whether it is operational and ready for application access or in an offline mode ready for log file replay to get it to a very specific point in time.
Yeah, and I remember one of the things we did specifically as an add-on back in the SMO days, Snap Manager for Oracle days. You make an interesting point, because when you're dealing with snapshots, you have to build, like we talked about last week with Snap Vault, etc. You have to build policies around what you want your frequency of snaps to be. So we would do hourly snapshots of quiesced snapshots using SnapDrive of the database itself. But then we would also use primary and secondary online redo log locations in separate volumes as mount points, and we would build SnapMirror relationships between primary and secondary offsite of those online redo logs hourly, right? So basically what you get is, what you were just describing, you bring up the latest and greatest snapshot. It might be 27 minutes old, but you need to replay that last 27 minutes of redo logs back into the database. So there would be this logical handoff from me, okay, DBA team, I've restored the snapshot back to production. Here's the mount point that you need to pull in your redo logs. And then they would write some SQL script to replay the logs into the database from the time that the snapshot was restored. There's this logical handoff that happens. And I got to admit, they loved that autonomy. Mm-hmm. They loved the ability that they knew that I had an hourly snapshot. Hey, Nick, they would open a ticket. Hey, Nick, please restore this snapshot to this instance.
Yep.
The latest snapshot from this instance. And they knew where their redo logs were because we had designed all of that together. So it was very collaborative and it was very smooth. And it would take seconds to modify the FS tab and get the backup mounted in the right place. Mm-hmm. And they would just take off and I washed my hands of it, and they told me if they needed anything else. It got so smooth. So there's elements of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's ways that you can script that and automate that using SnapCenter, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So we did it manual back in the day, 15, almost 20 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. So everything within SnapCenter is consumable via a REST API. You had mentioned PowerShell not too far back. PowerShell is still very present in at least the Windows-based plugins. So it's there and 100% consumable and accessible by the application owner. And you hit on some of the really big values that SnapCenter can bring into the environment. As you just mentioned, you can actually completely and totally offload that whole process away from your storage team and empower your database team to manage that environment in a very easy, simple to use way that makes their lives easier. And how you can even schedule it and have it run in an automated fashion, leveraging lifecycle workflows to automatically refresh environments.
Part of our workflow evolved to the point where when the backup of production was done, I told you before the show, we got it down to 58 seconds, which is crazy because we were coming from an 8-hour data guard run. We went from 8-hour data guard, 58-second Snap Manager for Oracle.
Yep.
If you don't think that will completely change your life in an IT department, it does. It completely changes every way you operate, because what we figured out how to do was once that 58 seconds was done, I had a new copy of production. What does every DBA want? A test environment. So we would refresh. We had scripted a refresh as a postscript once the SMO run finished to update and mount the latest production snapshot into the test. This happened nightly. So every day they had the latest and greatest production, within reason, in their test environment to work with. Those two things combined, I got a lot of good attaboys and pats on the back just from accomplishing that right there. And I would have never been able to do it without ONTAP. And that's one of the big takeaways for me. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with it.
It is. It's like I mentioned, the AirSnap capability is one of the reasons I came to work for NetApp. So you had mentioned, big exchange environments used to run on Symmetrics, and most of the time they did. I will tell you right now, the very first platform I would look for any database-driven workload at this point would be ONTAP.
Easily.
And ONTAP would have to not live up to some expectation in order for me to move away from it, primarily because, it's funny, we keep coming up with taglines and stuff like that, like intelligent data infrastructure and things of that nature. I honestly really dig intelligent data infrastructure because we really are that. The data management that ONTAP exposes to whomever the consumer is, whether it be a storage architect, whether it be a virtualization architect, whether it be a database team, whether it be an application team, what ONTAP exposes to you can make your life much easier. It actually brings real operational value to an organization. So I came at it from an application perspective. I had to know storage enough to make sure it was healthy for my application.
Yeah,
I work for ONTAP today because we still look at the world from an application-centric point of view and make sure that the workloads our customers are going to run on ONTAP are actually going to run well there and be well architected. So, and SnapCenter is a big part of that.
Well said. And like a lot of you said Symmetrics again, like a lot of that stuff back in the day, like I would just be given a LUN or a set of LUNs. I would write out and the request of like how many I needed, what I wanted them named, all that kind of where the mount points of IP addresses to allow and any of that kind of stuff. But I never really touched the storage systems. I was like you. I was coming at it from the MCSE side, from the Exchange admin, SQL admin, AD, right? But that was the extent of what I knew about storage at the time. That I just needed it. And it wasn't until I found ONTAP, 2007, implementing VMware over Fiber Channel, which, Like if I never have to see another WWPN, it won't be too soon. But
I'm
yeah, hashtag NAS for life, baby. So let's get into this because we've waffled on quite a bit. I want to make sure we have time to go through this. I'm going to pull the demo up here on screen and sort of like give us the guided tour, man, and don't skip out on any details because I want to make sure that for people that are new to NetApp and haven't seen any of this stuff before, I want to make sure that they are getting the best explanation here and we're not just assuming everybody knows everything about ONTAP.
Sure. So, SnapCenter with our latest version, SnapCenter 6, it comes in 2 flavors. If you are a fully Unix environment, we actually now have a distribution or an installation for that you can put on a Linux-based server. RHEL and SUSE are both the supported distros for that.
We haven't containerized this yet, have we?
Not yet. Stay tuned.
Okay, watch that space. Okay,
watch that space. It you're not the first person that's asked that question.
Okay.
So there are 2 distributions available. If you run a pure Linux or Unix based environment, and the applications you're primarily running are open systems applications or Oracle, you can run the Linux version of the software. From a UI perspective, it looks exactly the same. It installs differently, but that's, because you have wax versus slashes versus wax. And anybody who's been doing IT long enough knows exactly what I mean by those 2 things.
Yeah.
The Windows version contains all of the capabilities. So it can support your Windows and Linux and Unix hosts, and it can support SQL Server, SAP HANA, Oracle, and all of the open databases. And you'll hear me say that because there's like 8 or 9 of them that we've added, and I can't always rattle off all of them. So once you get into the SnapCenter server software deployed, you'll get this login screen. So I'm going to log in. I cheat in demos, but you don't have to. But you don't have to. So these environments, they're configured with minimal number of users. So everything's using an admin-based user, but you don't have to, and I'll show you where role-based access control comes into play. It's actually really simple and straightforward within SnapCenter. So this is your SnapCenter dashboard.
So I noticed that you put in demo WAC as a workspace, 80 integration, everything, all that's good.
Absolutely. And again, that's where I come in and feel like it's a very easy, role-based access control is very easy because effectively you connect ONTAP and SnapCenter into your Active Directory, and then you use Active Directory groups to manage everything, and that way your administrative overhead goes down a little bit.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to show you guys one of my favorite pieces, and this is keep in mind I work with SnapCenter a lot. I log into it probably at least 50 times a day, but not everybody does, and as such, I want to make sure that people see this one thing that I think is incredibly valuable, and that is up here at the top ribbon, you'll see your status, which is the overall dashboard, but you'll see this little button here called Get Started. If you click on it, over here on the left-hand side of the screen, now that's a network error. Don't just ignore it, but it will take you to a YouTube playlist. You'll get a multi-step wizard that is basically a step-by-step guide on how to get SnapCenter operational and taking backups and even being able to do recovery and cloning within your environment from start to finish, right?
Beautiful.
And you'll see even a couple of other cool things like, okay, so you want to use your own certificate authority and issue certificate yourself. Absolutely. Here you go. You can manage that facility within the SnapCenter construct and backup to object store. So for folks that are looking at a true 3-2-1 backup and look at snapshots as not being real backups because they don't meet that 3-2-1 capability, well, with SnapMirror based replication and then replicating that snapshot or triggering a third copy of it out to an S3 object, you now have 3 copies of your data in 2 different on 2 different medias, and you're meeting the definition of that. So
quick question for folks on that, not to derail too much, but when it says backup to object store, that's a generic way to describe it. Are we including Storage Grid, ONTAP S3, any of the object destinations in the cloud? Are there any limitations there? As long as it speaks S3, it's good?
As long as it speaks S3, it should be good. I'd have to double check on ONTAP S3, but I know for sure
Okay.
Storage Grid,
Okay.
AWS 3, and Azure Blob are all supported.
Okay.
I would imagine Google's S3 offering would be supported as well. It really just needs an S3 compliant object store.
As long as
And
it
I
can
think
talk gets and puts, it's probably fine.
it's probably fine. I don't think it ties any deeper into information lifecycle management than that. So the ONTAP location may be a good location as well.
Yep.
So yeah, just keep in mind that each of these, if you drop down on it, it will actually take you to the area within the software, and
cool.
You can click on it and it will give you the help and actually even run you through what you're doing and why you're doing it. Brilliant, right? It's not just here, go do this. It's do this. This is why you're doing it, and this is how you do it, the steps to get it done. And oh, by the way, I'm going to take you there. Cool.
I love that we've built this into the software without having to send you out to some external link, docs, stereo instructions kind of thing. It's all right here in the application. It's like, it reminds me of the beauty of Linux man pages. When they're done right, they're absolutely amazing. This looks incredible.
Yeah, it's one of these things. I show this to customers or prospective customers a lot, and they're like, "Oh wow, so I can actually teach myself how to use it." And I'm like, "Yes, you can."
Yep.
So it's really cool, and it gets into all of the individual steps. So we mentioned RBAC, or I mentioned RBAC, and that's kind of where I want to start. So there's a couple of different concepts. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this guy out. So there's three concepts to really be aware of from a role-based access control perspective. There's a credential, and that's basically a SnapCenter type of construct that says that it has the ability to manipulate individual elements within SnapCenter, and it may extend out to the storage and the application as well, right? So say the reason for that is because some things may have a different authentication boundary. For example, you may be using some sort of local or Linux-based authentication in your UX environment, right? You may not have it tied into into a name services or an LDAP. So you have the ability to define different credentials, right? Once you have credentials, and that's going to determine how you actually authenticate. Once you've created the credential, you also can apply roles, right? And it's really cool. SnapCenter ships with 4 default roles. So you have your overall admin role, and that's root or God. Then you have app backup and clone, and these are guys that can create, manage, and run backup, clone, and restoration activity. Then you have folks that can just view those. And then you have folks that can manage the overall SnapCenter infrastructure. So this would be like the SnapCenter server and connections into ONTAP storage arrays.
So that has elevated privileges above SnapCenter admin?
No, it's a subset. But what it can't do is
see.
It can't manipulate, say, resource groups inside of SnapCenter.
Gotcha. I get it. Database. So it's basically, it can manage the server itself, but it can't tinker with any of the backups and restores and stuff.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
And while we ship these 4, the other really interesting thing is you can click on it and you can customize them.
Oh, you can control them.
It's very granular down to what you can and cannot add. So, and you can do creates, allows, denies, read, updates, etc. On a lot of different elements. You can see the members of that group. But you can also very easily click your little checkbox here and copy out one, so that then you can manipulate your own. And if you forget what you've changed, you can always go back to the original, right? Yeah. So very flexible, very granular. And the last part of our RBAC is you can tie it into the users that have access. So you can see here we have our user that's administrator. It's from that domain, and it's got the role of SnapCenter admin, but you can absolutely configure multiple different types and add the users or groups. So, again, in this environment, it's very simple, but if you have an elaborate group strategy. You can just define the groups here, and then as users come and go or change roles within your environment, you just add them within the group. Within your
I have to send a massive kudos to the SnapCenter team for just this alone. The amount of work and the level of effort it takes to really get the layers upon layers of RBAC right, especially in an AD integrated environment, is not trivial. This is really smooth and beautiful. Spoken as somebody who's, going on 30 years of MCSE type stuff with AD. Like this is really well done.
Oh, thanks, man. I will definitely make sure I pass that on to the SnapCenter team. And I will say that, anybody who's worked with NetApp and SnapCenter for a long time has seen that SnapCenter there was a period where it was taking some lumps, and, it wasn't getting as much love from NetApp as it should, and it showed in the product. What I can tell you now is that with our refocus on winning in block and really trying to re-own those applications again, the SnapCenter team is invigorated and they're making big adjustments. Like I said, we had 2 major releases in the past calendar year. We are on track for basically a major release of the SnapCenter software twice a year. Beautiful. And the payload, as they keep delivering, it keeps getting better and better. So stay tuned. There's always something new happening. So and that's a great way to kind of roll out of RBAC. So again, Air RBAC is very well defined within the SnapCenter construct. And once you've got your users defined, the next thing you want to do is you want to connect to storage. So SnapCenter supports storage management at 2 layers. So you can give it the cluster, the ONTAP cluster, or you can give it individual SVMs and use the individual SVM admins. So again, keeping in line with their multi-tenancy capabilities, and that, again, making sure that you have the right level of access and maintaining security, SnapCenter aligns with that all the way through the product, right?
And this goes back to that RBAC stuff, because you might have certain admins or app owners that only need access to a particular SVM with their volumes or LUNs attached to it. And this allows you to whittle that down into what we used to call secure multi-tenancy, right? You have the ability to sort of segment even your backup software across, info or data domains and stuff that you're going to have within your NetApp storage system, across SVMs, across different data sets and things like that. This is fantastic, man. This is the first time I'm really seeing this latest version, and it's great for me to see it sort of blind in a way too. So I'm reacting kind of organically because this is really cool. I honestly didn't know that we had something that would be this powerful. So I'm expecting a lot of our audience maybe didn't know that either.
The more that we can drive awareness of it, the better. And something else I want to kind of show you and point out real quick, if you look at the platform, it shows CVO. So one thing to point out, SnapCenter supports databases in on-premise ONTAP, whether it be, or it supports it in Cloud Volumes ONTAP, NetApp FSx NetApp and AWS, and as well as database backup in ANF. So you can run the gamut, and again, if it's running ONTAP, there's a better than average chance that SnapCenter is going to be able to integrate and provide database protection across your entire data lifecycle.
Let's add a new one. What does that dialogue look like when you're adding a new storage system? Are you just putting in the cluster management LIF IP?
Pretty much.
But you can also do the SVM specifically?
Absolutely. Okay. And you can put the SVM IP in and the SVM admin user and password. And you can actually even, so again, if you're leveraging ONTAP that's been integrated with Active Directory and you have administration being done, authorization for your ONTAP admins being done by AD, you can plug that in here as well. So
nice. So if ONTAP is AD integrated, if you've got all that set up, you can do your domain authentication.
It'll pass it through
the SVM level.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
It's very cool. And so once you're connected into storage, next thing you're going to do is you're going to add a host. As you can see here, we've got two different hosts, and we've got a VMware vSphere host. So that's our SnapCenter plugin for VMware. And then we have our SQL host, which is running the Microsoft Windows Server plugin and the SQL Server plugin. Now, one thing to quickly note, while you see the SnapCenter plugin for VMware deployed here, you don't manage virtual machines in this interface.
Okay.
SnapCenter does want to have a connection to that, and we'll get into why in just a minute. But just something too important to note out, when we go into resources, you're not going to see resources for all of your VMs in the SnapCenter framework today. You're going to see it from file system and application perspective.
Gotcha.
Now, as you can see here, I've already got my two hosts or my host, and I've got my SQL Server deployed. If we click on it, you can see that our status of the the plugin is that it's running. We can see our host type. We can see that the system's not clustered. So an important thing to note, SnapCenter works with clustered databases, and it works with rack, and it works with Windows failover clusters, as well as always on availability groups inside of SQL.
That was going to be my question. How about continuous availability groups with SQL? Good.
It's already aware, and it gives you the option to either back up the active copy, or you can push it off to a preferred replica, so that if you have a read-only copy that your backup should be running from, you can absolutely do that because it's a lower hit server.
So there's a plugin here. Walk me through the plugin. Is that deployed when you add the host to SnapCenter? Okay.
Yep.
That's not a manual thing, like you just have to go install SnapDrive on whatever host,
nope.
Right? Yeah.
So if you look at your managed host screen, you'll see that you can click add, choose your host type, whether it be a Windows, Linux, vSphere, or AIX host. Give it the...
That's a name I've not heard for an age.
Yeah, it's fun. So you give it the host name. You tell it which plugins you want to push. And then if you had additional options, like, so say you wanted to change the port, by default, the client and the server, or the plugin and the server, communicate across port 8145. But if you wanted to customize that, this is where you would do it. The installer does run some pre-install checks and will push back a message to the SnapCenter console if one of the pre-install checks should happen to fail, and basically say, hey, you got to go fix this first. And then this is something that I believe we introduced in either 4.8 or maybe 4.7, and that is the ability to use Active Directory group managed service accounts. So again, we stay in tune with what Microsoft is pushing.
And does the plugin just run as a service on the system?
It does. It basically installs a single service, and by default, I believe it runs as either network service or local system service. So it's not even a domain user that is logging in as the service on the end host. It follows all of the proper rules.
Nice.
And then from there, you just click submit, and I should be installing a new Windows plugin on my jump host, assuming my jump. Yep. There we go. So it pushes it out, and you can see it'll run through the different statuses as the installation runs through, and then once it's done, it'll come up and tell you that it's installed and running.
Are we talking about 10 minutes? Are we talking about 60 seconds?
It depends. It's definitely less than 10 minutes, unless it's a really slow network. It's typically, I'd say, 3 minutes or so. Around where that works. I will come back to that. It's not going to stop us from being able to move on while that's running. But the other cool thing is if you notice here, we can click one, and we've got this option for more, right? So you can even upgrade the services from here. If you're going into maintenance mode, you can do that. You can suspend schedules for a given client, restart and manipulate the service from within this console. So
from an administration standpoint, this is the breadth of this is really impressive.
I'm sure the SnapCenter team would like that. I see it so much that I start taking some of it for granted. And again, so it's good to hear that it is a useful interface, right? One of the downsides we mentioned to the Snap managers was because they were installed individually. There was no centralized reporting. Well, SnapCenter, you've got a report node, and you can run reports, schedule reports. You can run reports across different types, and even have them emailed out to folks, so that you have a good awareness, right? The monitor is if you have anything going on within your environment and you want to see what's going on, like you want to see what's actually happening during that plugin installation, you can come into the job monitor, highlight the job, and click details. And it'll give you first this graphical kind of overlay of what's going on with the system in a little bit of detail here. Or if you want to see the raw log file, you can click the view logs button, and you can actually see that the in-depth log activity of what's going on with the system. So if there's an error, you can be like, oh, what do you mean? What error is there? You know,
I'm giggling. I apologize, but I'm giggling because for those of you out there, you have no idea how good you have it right now. I would have killed for something like this in the late 2000s.
Oh yeah,
we were doing we had all of the Snap Manager products: Exchange, Oracle, SQL, and VMware. And I'm trying to think if there were any other ones we don't know. We had to manage them all independently. We had to configure them all independently. There was no central management or access control. Everything was bespoke. It all had to be updated manually with new SnapDrive plugins and new Snap Manager installations, as we said earlier, on every single host. Like, this has completely changed the game, and I would have killed to have something like this back then. Wow.
Yeah, well, so you're opening a support case because you got something going on and maybe you can't figure it out. Well, you can click download, and it'll automatically download the entire log set for you.
Of course it will.
So, and you can just provide that log bundle directly to support, right? And now that takes us to the really fun stuff, and that's resources. So resources are the items you're trying to protect, right? Whether it be a database, whether it be a file system. In this environment, we've only got the Windows plugin and a SQL plugin deployed. So that's really all you're going to see is Windows-based file systems
Gotcha.
on the host from either a path or resource group. Now, resource groups are a logical construct inside of SnapCenter. Think of it as a way to group together stuff that you want to have run the same backup policies with the same schedules. You can create a new resource group, as you can see here, and then put all of your individual resources in it.
Oh, so this is choosing like you've got your database layout for the instance over on the left there. Okay.
Yep.
I see it.
And so you can say, I have, DB or DB, DB1, right? And you can just go through and it'll give you the ability to take all of your resources, whether it be at a database instance or, as I had mentioned before, availability group level. You can grab it and it'll select all the resources from the same storage volume. So that means if you've got multiple databases sitting in that are being backed by the same ONTAP volume, it's going to be smart enough to just create a single snapshot for and include all of those databases in it. So again, very aware with what's going on within ONTAP. But for now, let's actually do some fun stuff. We can see we've got a succeeded backup of our worldwide importers database. Now, this environment's really cool. And again, one more big shout out to our Lab on Demand team, because they actually built this lab in response.
Missed opportunity to call it Prestige Worldwide. So
Prestige Worldwide.
You know.
But these guys built this for me because it's got a really interesting aspect in that there are two databases sitting in the SQL server. And one of the databases leverages VMDKs and a VMFS-based data store. So you've got a block data store device being presented to ESX with VMDKs and SQL database files in it. The other database is in iSCSI guest connected, lines to the same VM. The virtual machine itself lives in an NFS data store.
Okay.
So you've got NFS, you've got VMFS with VMDK, you've got in-guest iSCSI. All being backed up, all being protected, all running from the same ONTAP cluster. all tied in. I know you said you talked to Tony last week, so they're also all tied into our Snap Mirror capability. So you can see we've got a backup that succeeded here. I'm going to just kind of quickly show you. We've got the backup. You can see the local copy on the original storage, and these are our mirror and vaulted snapshots that got sent over to secondary storage once we completed the backup. We can do stuff with the backup, like we can rename it, we can clone it, we can restore it, or we can run another backup. So we're actually going to add protection to the AdventureWorks database. If you remember here, you'll see that it'll show you for AdventureWorks, it's not protected. So we're going to click on it, and we're going to run through the protection wizard. I like to use custom names, so I want to know that this is an application consistent snapshot. And the reason for that is that anybody who's been working with ONTAP for a period knows that you can have scheduled ONTAP-based snapshots. Well, that can occur at the volume level. This gives me the ability to know that when I'm looking at snapshots inside of ONTAP through System Manager or the CLI, that these were created with SnapCenter and are therefore application consistent, right?
Yeah, let's define what that is for people that may not know, because I know not everybody's a DBA. So with I can speak to the Oracle side of it, like the old SnapManager. So the Oracle integration will put your database in a quiesced state by actually executing a SQL command against the database, alter database open, which basically just sits it. And I think it's a similar something SQL command that runs for Microsoft SQL.
Mm-hmm.
But you can pre-script these as well to do a lot of this work. But what it does is it puts it into a state that is ready to be snapped, a state that is ready to be backed up in a consistent way, so that it's queuing incoming writes until you tell it alter database closed, and then it allows those writes to come back, start flowing back in. So you get that clean. Yes, to your point, you could just go in and like dirty snap the whole NFS volume, and it may boot back up, and the instance may come back up, but it's going to have some errors. You're going to have to replay some logs, things like that. Or you can come in and do it properly, quiesce the database, take your snap, and then take different snaps for the virtual machine under the covers.
Yep. That's
hope 100%. I explained all that the right way. Is that still the practice today?
Absolutely. You know, it is 100% how it works. And from a Microsoft perspective or from a SQL Server perspective, we tie into VSS and the VDI framework, right? So that we do our free snap thaw within the VSS timeframe. Within Oracle, it's exactly how you mentioned. And all of the database writes are quiesced, and they keep in mind that the time frame for those snapshots, while the database can be frozen, is a very small window. It's less than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's the time we have to be able to create our snapshot. We do them that fast. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
And the other side of the application consistency is that it also does log file management. So within databases, log file sequence and log sequence numbers, what's happened in that transaction log and the order it happens in is very important. So from that application perspective, we preserve log sequence numbers, and we'll actually even tie into the database application and mark that the database has been backed up. So if you, for example, if we go in and we look at our SQL Server Management Studio and we look at the properties of the Worldwide Importers database, that last database backup that's flagged here on the database coincides with the same backup inside of SnapCenter. So again, highly orchestrated, highly integrated capability. When we're applying protection to a new database, so we select the resource, we did that. You can pick a policy from an existing policy set, or you can even create a new policy. Okay. We'll go ahead and we'll go with our ad hoc SQL. That applies it, but we could also apply this one, which would allow us to configure a schedule for it.
So this is basically configuring a Snap Vault policy under the covers?
This is actually configuring a backup policy. So the type of backup, whether it's a full backup, a log backup, a copy only backup, or a full and log backup. So the database specifics. And we'll quickly just walk through what those policies look like. So we'll create a new one. Go test. And my typing is atrocious, but we're not going to fix it. So you get a couple of different options. So again, it knows it's a SQL-based plugin. It knows it's a SQL database. So it's going to say, give me some SQL-specific options. You can choose the backup type. This is where it'll tie into your availability groups. We don't have one, but this is where you can manage that.
This is really well thought out. I'm genuinely impressed.
Again, I think AirSQL plugin is incredibly well baked, and it shows really well. All of the plugins get a lot of love, and they make life a lot easier. We'll go with on demand just so that we don't get into weirdness and we're coming up short on time. So this is where we tie into retention on snapshots, right? So those that are ONTAP familiar, we can tie in and actually set our retention on our snapshots, and we can do it either on a number of backups for the logs or a total number of snapshot copies to keep or a number of days to keep those snapshots. From there, this is where we tie into SnapMirror for replication. So if we have a protection relationship, we just flip these checkboxes. We give
if you
it.
don't choose those, what happens? Where do the backups go? Are they just local snapshots to the volume?
Exactly. They're local snapshots to the volume on the primary controller.
Got it. So this is if we want to send it somewhere else after it's done locally.
Correct. So we've created a valid application consistent snapshot on the local storage. Now we're going to trigger our application so that we have that snapshot in an offsite location.
Beautiful.
This is the page you kept alluding to. So you have the option to specify either a pre or post script. So you can have, say you've got a SQL script to put the database in a specific state that you want to run before the snapshot, and then you want to put it back into another state after the snapshot. You can specify those scripts here, and SnapCenter will run them and execute them before it does the snapshot, and then again after the snapshot.
And I like how it's putting the path there so that the scripts can exist locally on the server as well.
Absolutely.
Is that what that was for? Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. That is so you can go to a local path on the host. This is where SnapCenter will tie into a database verification. So in the SQL world, it basically ties into the DBCC utility and can run integrity and verification checks against the database in the snapshot to make sure that the database is recoverable. And then when you get your summary, you finish. So now we've created a policy. We've applied the policy to the database. We're going to unselect the daily just because I don't feel like getting yelled at about scheduling errors. You can offload verification. So if you have a non-production SQL server, you can say, hey, once the backup's completed, if you want to actually run that DBCC verification, you can point it to like a workstation that's got SQL Server Management Studio installed and mount it there and have it run the verification, not against your production system. We've only got a single SQL server in this environment, so we'll choose it. Load locators, it's actually now going to map out the paths to the secondary storage location.
Wow.
So it knows the source volume and the destination volume and the source cluster and destination cluster. Sending a notification, so that's obligatory. Everything's got to send an email. Done. And now we've added protection, and we can run that back up now.
The hack, though, on the email thing is like put the service account of your help desk software or your ServiceNow account, and it'll just log a ticket, not your inbox.
Correct. So while that backup's running, which it's probably already, it did. It just finished.
Yeah,
it's
that was
so
quick.
fast.
Did it even take a second? So I want to hit on something real quick because I want to keep in. One of the things that I learned this year at Insight was that there are a lot of new customers out there looking for 101 getting started kind of content. I want to steer you, in case you have any questions about anything that Artie just showcased around SnapVir, SnapVault, and building policies and stuff like that. Do me a favor and go back and watch last week's episode on SnapMirror with Tony Ansley, because that'll give you some of those foundational fundamentals. This is taking it just one step deeper to get down into application consistency beyond just mirroring volumes and storage units on the storage systems itself. So just a note there. I know SnapMirror, SnapVault, all these words can be confusing. Go back and check out last week's episode to get a little bit more understanding around what the differences are there.
Absolutely. So that's SnapCenter doing backups.
Wow. So currently, like you mentioned that there's support for this across a myriad of open databases, Oracle, SQL, We don't see too much Exchange anymore due to O365 or M365, I guess it is now.
It is, but we still have the plugin, and it still works. It's still fully functional.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if you're still hosting your own Exchange environment, first of all, kudos. And that you're still doing it in 2024. I mean, that's respect. That would be hard to resist the SaaS-based management of O365. All right, so I'm going to pull this off the screen real quick. So we got a couple questions that came in here. So Heino said, when will you be able to do an hourly schedule that runs in a window of, say, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.? We have SQL Server jobs that run at midnight that causes hourly snapshots to fail. I'm wondering if that's a configuration of a daily versus an hourly, if it's running at midnight, because the midnight snap is considered the daily.
Right. The midnight snap's considered the daily, and that's probably what I would do. Is I'd probably configure a daily job.
Yep.
And then have it maybe rerun every hour.
Yep.
There's a couple of different ways to configure that. That's an interesting use case. I'd like to dig in a little bit more with that, Heino.
He says no hourly log backups. So, okay.
So you want to run your full at the start. So just as an example, make sure I understand it correctly. You want to run a full backup, say at the start, at the top of an hour, and then have log backups run in between them, or just have a one daily full backup and then run hourly log backups, because you should be able to do that.
We just, when I was doing this, we just kept them on separate volumes. So if we had our online redo logs on separate volumes, and it wasn't very large or substantial, but we would only keep, I think it was 7 days. It wasn't even that much. It may have been one full day of, because we would set up hourly snaps, we would do 23 hourlies, right? So you'd get this rolling rotation of every hour, and then we would do 6 dailies at midnight. So you'd have the 23 hourlies and then the daily at midnight. And then by the end of the week, you would have this rolling thing of 6 dailies and 1 weekly. Right? So the way you build this policy out, because we had to keep copies of this, it had a lot of PII in it. So it was very encrypted, we were a public health company, so we had to keep all that stuff around for ages. But that's the way we did it. We did 23 hourlies, 6 dailies, 3 weeklies, 12 monthlies.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where he would end up having to be. I'm understanding his question. I've run into it before. Basically, if you have that log backup scheduled hourly and you have that daily backup run, it kicks off at midnight. Well, there's also a log job that's going to try to run at midnight as well. You can't skip that window. So they'll
conflict. They'll hit each other, and that's one of the reasons why you want to put it in a separate volume as well. That's the way I always thought about it, and we would treat it as a completely separate mount point for Oracle, but mount it to a completely different volume. He followed up here and said the issue is that we have other SQL jobs that sets the databases into a mode where SnapCenter cannot back them up. Yeah, and that's because there's already a backup going, if I'm reading this right.
Yes, and that's really what's going on. And he's right. That the bottom line is that where we're really granular with everything else, like we're RBAC and stuff, the scheduler's pretty simple, and it doesn't give you the ability to skip, right? You can't skip a 15-minute window or whatever. So I don't have a time frame for that, but I understand, and I've run into that as well when I've been trying to do big point in time recoveries where you've got a lot of logs that you need to go through and replay. So configuring those jobs, I will admit, has been can be a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of admin overhead. I'll take that feedback to the team and see where they can get it into the priority list.
Awesome. Thank you. Heino, thanks for the great questions, man. Another one here from OG. Since Windows Server 2025 just got released, which apparently finally includes native NVMe initiators, is that also on the horizon for SnapCenter?
So yes, it will be NVMe over TCP will be a supported protocol with SnapCenter in a very near-term release. I can't get into any more specifics than that, other than stay tuned. It's been a big area where we need to make sure that SnapCenter catches up because we're hearing a lot of customers express interest and specifically NVMe over TCP. The lower latency and super high speed network cards are making that a really attractive alternative to fiber channel fabrics.
I'll expand on that and say that anything to do with NVMe over TCP at NetApp is pretty high priority. Everything from the hardware systems and the interface cards all the way up to the integrations and the auxiliary software. It is being very highly adopted in the cloud, which piques our interest because people are going to want both the power, the horsepower of block, but the efficiency of using their existing Ethernet networks. Trust me, everything we're doing at NetApp right now, it has an NVMe over TCP conversation happening related to it.
Yep.
It's 100%. Not if, it's when, pretty much with everything.
Absolutely.
Well, Artie, I know we're a little bit over, but this was fantastic, man. And I'm selfishly, like, this was my first viewing of SnapManager. God, that's going to be an old one to get rid of. SnapCenter 6. I'd previously seen some of the stuff in 5, and even with that, I had never really taken I'm not doing day-to-day ops at this point, so I had never really taken a full guided tour. So for me, personally, thank you. That was incredible. I'm genuinely impressed. So, I mean, to the SnapCenter team, holy smokes, you guys have a really well-baked product there. And it looks great, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Is there a ability to run it externally via PowerShell still? Do people need to do the GUI? Is there a CLI integration of some point? I'm just trying to think of things that I thought about as we were talking through some of that stuff, questions that people might have.
So you still need to install the server, which is going to install the GUI, but you don't have to use the UI to manage it. So everything inside of SnapCenter has a REST API associated with it. So if you want to leverage REST, you can do that. It's still very heavily PowerShell driven. So again, you have to install the software, which will get you access and all of the commandlets from both the plugin and the server side. And if you want to script away at PowerShell on orchestrating your entire backup solution, go for it. You can do that.
Nice. I'll get those links to the API reference and PowerShell stuff. We'll make sure we put it in the description for you guys, or drop it over in Discord if you want to come join us. Artie, thank you so much, man. As soon as we have updates on the next of the latest and greatest, definitely want to have you back on.
Absolutely.
And maybe some members from the team so that we can give them some kudos.
Yeah.
But this has been fantastic. Again, I want to encourage people, if you want to try some of this yourself in a destructive environment, you can go to our Lab on Demand stuff at labondemand.netapp.com. Try it out for yourself. This is really cool stuff. Any other final closing thoughts, Artie, that you want to leave people with when it comes to SnapCenter?
Yeah, if you guys want to take a deep dive on your own, reach out to me. I'm always available. I love talking SnapCenter. Like I literally do. I can talk SnapCenter nonstop for days. So yeah, give me a call. Hit me up on X or on Discord. I'm actually in the Discord, so if you post something to the SnapCenter channel, I'll see it and respond to it most likely. So yeah, just use it. Dude, this is included software. If you own an ONTAP controller, you own a license for SnapCenter. There's nothing. Try it out. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, uninstall and get rid of it.
I can't believe we didn't even mention that once in over an hour.
I know.
I don't want to say it's free, but it's free. It's like you said, it's included. Like, this is powerful backup software that ties directly into your storage for all of your tier 1 applications. And it just, the other software that we have will manage a lot of more of the unstructured stuff or just volume level stuff. But this will take care of all of your application consistency and replace a lot of potentially very expensive software you have out there. I say that as someone who went through it. So we saved $1 million a year just in Oracle licensing, getting rid of DataGuard RMAN and enterprise editions, kind of stuff, just using the SnapManager suites. So
absolutely. I mean, so you mentioned that whole database refresh thing, right?
Yeah.
The biggest time sink for that is doing the backup beforehand and the backup afterwards. Now you can cut that down to 10 seconds on both sides, right?
Yeah.
It's easy. It's good software. I appreciate you having me on, Nick. I'll come back whenever you want. Use the software, folks. Thank you.
Yep. Give it a try. Let us know. Come tag Artie in Discord if you have any questions. But thanks, Artie.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, there you go. Another one in the books. We are going to have much more of these as we finish out the calendar year here. We're going over a lot of these Snap and Flex words that are part of ONTAP, that are part of the ecosystem that we've built here. And to find out more of them, to keep up with it, make sure you're subscribed here on the NetApp YouTube channel. Make sure you've joined us over in Discord. These are the two best places to keep up with all things here on the show. My name is Nick Howell. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back next week with stuff that I can't tell you about yet, but we have an extra special week next week, and if you happen to look at the NetApp YouTube channel, you may see something scheduled for Monday and Wednesday, and potentially more by the end of the week. Go check it out. Thanks for watching today, folks. We will see you next time. It's going to be an exciting week next week. You don't want to miss it out. Take care.